from the heart of trucker America, my boy Reed Coverdale, host of The Naturalist, Capitalist.
This is what government does. It sucks. It is that perfect mixture of inept and conniving.
Some of my closest relationships are now ruined.
If you think you're going to win people over by stating commonplaces, you're just selling the other parts.
If you are just contrarian, you are by default going to be wrong, because they're always going to have some tidbit of truth.
It is about dictating every transaction that you have for the rest of your life.
Libertarians need to get out of New York. They need to get out of California.
Insurrection at Capitol Hill.
That was the beginning of my program.
Coverdale is the guy to be president of the United States.
No one's willing to change anything about themselves to get there.
Well, I'll put a 50 cal attached to my Suburban.
And he died doing what he loved, chasing a minor.
This guy's a fucking murderer.
The gulag is going to be in your house, completely estranged from everything but propaganda. Pearl Harbor was not a surprise, and Saddam did not have nuclear weapons.
Unless you solve the central problem, then we'll be fighting over Mr. Potato Head forever.
He should not be alive. This is unfucking believable.
I've got to get him out of that truck at night and get him into the White House.
Hey, what's going on, guys? I figured I'd just do another live stream today because I got some time. I'm going to be on Liam McCollum's podcast at 2:30. I don't know if that's live. I think it's probably pre-recorded, but anyway, wow. Did you guys watch the Fetterman versus Oz debate last night? That was nuts. I got to admit, I was having fun the whole time because it was just so fucking hilarious. I mean, look, I don't like Dr. Oz at all, but holy shit. I mean, to act like Fetterman is even able to hold the position, which is what the media has been trying to, they've been trying to hide his inability to speak or understand what people are saying or hold office at all for the last several months. And I've seen it because, I could see it on Twitter. I could see people post clips of him just going off the rails, but most people in regular everyday life had like no idea how bad he was until that debate last night. And oh man, it's so funny, like seeing the people say, oh, you're making fun of him for his impediment or you're being ableist. And it's like, yes, I am being ableist because you should have certain abilities if you want to be a fucking senator. Like, I mean, this whole idea that discrimination is bad, like there is reasonable discrimination for certain positions. I mean, like discriminating based on race for whether or not you have certain rights in a society is bad discrimination. But then there's discrimination like, hey, if you want to be a football player, you can't be 5'2" and 100 pounds and asthmatic. I mean, that's discrimination right there. Or if you're going to be you got to be able to run under a 7-minute mile if you want to be on the track team or something. Like those are pretty basic discriminations that make sense. And you should discriminate when you're choosing someone who's going to run for Senate. Another form of discrimination I use is like, are you anti-war or not? I mean, I discriminate against pro-war candidates. I'm not going to vote for them. But there are other things that matter too, and this is one of them. So I just thought this whole thing was absolutely hilarious. I didn't know what your guys' thoughts were. I've already got a few people chiming in. Let's see. Life and Liberty asks, do you like horror movies? If so, which one is your favorite? I do not like horror movies, especially modern ones. I feel like they're just gross. They're not really scary. I'm trying to think of the last time I even watched a horror movie. I don't know. I've seen one of the what's it even called? The guy with the hockey mask. Can't even remember what his name. I think his name's Jason. I watched one of those that was from like the 90s, and I actually thought it was pretty good. I mean, it was kind of gory, so they were relying on that a little bit, but it wasn't really that. I don't know. They didn't rely on that as much as like suspense. So I thought that one was good. I don't remember which one it was, but no, I'm not really into horror movies. I know I'm out of the season. Couldn't watch the Fetterman. I couldn't watch Fetterman was a train wreck personified. It was amazing. I encourage everyone to go watch it. It was, I mean, I'll admit I have gotten to a point where I don't care about policy that much anymore when it comes to actual races like this, because I realize, I'm on Jeremy Kaufman's campaign. I realize there's no way he's going to win, and either Bolduc or Hassan are going to suck royally. So there's no way that, the policies I want to see implemented are going to end up getting implemented. So to me at this point, it's mostly just about what is the maximum amount of entertainment I can get out of this clown show in the meantime. That's why I want to see Trump versus DeSantis in the primary. I think that would be an amazing show. But what we saw last night was just a little bit of what I love. I love seeing that. I mean, it just shows how stupid the whole system is. It's a condemnation of democracy for sure. That the fact that guy could end up being a senator is just absolutely insane. Can you help me understand what a Zionist Jew is versus other Jews? Rye had a video the other day with the Kanye interview, and Rye said it wasn't all Jews, just the Zionist ones. So yeah, Zionism is a specific ideology based on the idea that you have a homeland that was set aside for you by God, and it's your right to take that land and remove the people who are living there in the meantime. So this isn't specific just to Judaism. I mean, Manifest Destiny was a very similar idea for the Americans when they were pushing west. The idea that God has given this land to us and it's ours to take from the savages. And then it's pretty similar to Lebensraum with the Nazis too. The idea that, this is the true fatherland and this is the Aryan homeland. This is ours. It's not something that's just specific to Judaism, but Zionism is cloaked in the religious bullshit of Judaism, and it's also cloaked in the religious bullshit of Christianity, because a lot of Christians believe that that Jerusalem has to be the capital of Israel in order for Jesus to come back. So that's the difference. And also the word Jew is kind of, it doesn't just mean religious. It's also an ethnicity. It's also a religion. So it's kind of confusing. So if you start saying stuff like the Jews, it's a really vague statement with how that word is interpreted. Because are you talking about a race? Are you talking about a religion? Are you talking about a country? And it's super convoluted, and the lines are very blurred, and it's just not, it doesn't make any sense the way it's structured, but it also makes it hard to criticize a country or a religion or an ethnic cleansing strategy or a group of people. It's purposefully blurred so that you can't touch any of those subjects without being grouped in as a Nazi, basically. So that is how I would describe the difference. Thanks for the $5 super chat. Doesn't Adam Green refer to Ryan as a Russian agent? I have no idea. That is a question for one of them. I've never heard that. I honestly don't know Adam Green. I saw briefly, I saw Ryan on his show before he came on ours, but I only watched it for like 10 minutes. If you remember when I had him on, I had him introduce himself because I don't really even know that much about him, but he was an interesting guy to talk to. The horrifying reality is that we have illiterates, malcontents, sociopaths, and thieves representing us without hiding their immoral proclivities while having a majority of the public support. That sure is the truth right there, Adam. That is 100% what's going on. Any update on Bolduc coming on? So let me read this email. I read this one on the last live stream I did, but it does not sound like he's going to be coming on, but his campaign team reached out to me and asked me what I wanted to ask him, and if I just had a single question, I could send it and he'd get the answer for me. So let me pull it up here. Okay. So here is, one second, here's the email I sent. So this was to the political director who was supposedly going to give it to Bolduc, and then they're going to write me back with a response. Still no response yet. But it said on February 28th, directly after the invasion of Ukraine, you said that we should go all in on Ukraine militarily, economically, and advocated for putting special forces and CIA troops on the ground. You then said that we should go after China so they don't take Taiwan. These statements were so hawkish that Corey Lewandowski said it disqualified you from ever being a United States senator. Also, Pentagon correspondent Jennifer Griffin said to suggest that the United States would put an indirect fire or special operations or CIA on the ground to give Putin any excuse to broaden this conflict is extremely dangerous talk at a time like this. Your website also says that you believe we should go after rogue nations like Iran and North Korea. And though you claim to have supported the withdrawal from Afghanistan, when the time came, you buckled and said it was wishful thinking to say we could leave, even though Biden's deadline was pushed back from Trump's deadline by 5 months. So my question to you is, why should I trust you as a general with military experience who can't claim lack of preparedness or lack of knowledge not to lead this country into more stupid wars? So I think that was a very fair question to ask, but no response yet. Still waiting on a response. Once I have the response, I will publish it in a Substack, and I'll probably do a YouTube video about it. Obviously, that's not a question that he's going to want to answer because it's not just something about like puberty blockers in the water or something easy to talk about. It's it's a real question that kind of shows his inconsistency. And I've seen a lot of Tulsi supporters who are angry that I've been pointing out that Bolduc is a warmonger, and that the Libertarian Party in New Hampshire has been pointing it out. And they're saying Bolduc has changed his position. And the only thing they have to point to that is a town hall that I actually went to where Tulsi Gabbard spoke for like 20 minutes. And to be fair, I mean, she did. Anyone who knows her knows that she can give like a really, really good analytical takedown of somebody, like she did to Kamala Harris. At Young Americans for Liberty a few months ago in Orlando, she gave a speech about Biden, and it was like that. It was just 100% spot on, vicious, detailed takedown of what an awful president he is. She can do that type of speech, or she can do the pretty generic, vague, like, we are all children of God and we have the spirit of aloha and we're all Americans, blah, 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 kind of just vague pontifications. That was what most of her speech was. She did mention in it that, Biden says that how the war ends is up to Putin, and that's insane, and that's not leadership. And General Don Bolduc has sworn an oath to protect and defend the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and he'll put our interests first or whatever. And then he got up and his speech it really wasn't that great. I mean, there wasn't anything in it that really stuck out to me as like, oh, wow, this guy really takes this seriously and wants to de-escalate tensions and is going to do everything he can to keep World War III from happening. In fact, he made a few statements, one of which was, the United States military has saved more lives than it's taken. And his whole thing is peace through strength. And that is the statement peace through strength is really vague, because what does that mean? Because to an extent, I agree with peace through strength. Like, I think strength is not invading countries all over the world. I think it's having a strong economy and showing that you have a strong defense and that you're willing to come to the negotiating table and be bold. Like, I think Trump going to North Korea was peace through strength. I think that showed strength. I don't think that showed weakness for him to go there and sit down with Kim Jong-un. So Biden is showing ultimate weakness by like lashing out and pumping all these weapons and everything into Ukraine, but also not being willing to talk to Putin. But a lot of people would take that statement like peace through strength to mean something completely different. What does that mean? Does that mean we should be bombing the shit out of Ukraine and Russia, occupied Ukraine and Russia? Like, should we be fucking shooting tons of missiles at Russian tanks? Because that's what Don Bolduc made it sound like his strategy was right after the invasion kicked off. He was saying we should be interdicting columns of Russian troops, Russian tanks, Russian artillery, and we should be putting special forces on the ground and doing indirect fires on the troops and everything, which is what I was referencing in that email that I sent to his campaign. So if that's peace through strength, like, yeah, that's not going to bring us peace. That's just being fucking stupid. So he hasn't really changed his position. He doesn't approve of the endless money going to Ukraine without a strategy, but we have seen what his strategy is. Unless he's willing, if he has really changed, that email that I sent him, they should be able to easily send a response with a very cogent, very cogent reasoning as to why he has changed his mind and what his current view is. But I haven't gotten a response, and they haven't really, they haven't really proven to me that his mind has changed, because he just gives like kind of dumb, just dumb pontifications about how we're going to be strong and we're going to put America first, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't mean anything unless you can give me some specific examples about what you're going to do. Let's see. Is New Hampshire noticeably more free than other areas of the country? Yeah, it is. It's rated number 1 for freedom in the country. I think Florida's number 2 right now. With mandates for COVID and lockdowns and stuff like that going away, it's probably become a little bit less obvious, but, we don't have a sales tax. We don't have an income tax. You don't have to wear a seatbelt. You don't have to wear a helmet on a motorcycle. I know those might sound kind of dumb, but that is a pretty striking difference from surrounding states. You can buy guns. There's no waiting period. There's background checks, because that's federal, but there's no limit to how many guns you can buy. There's no limit to how many rounds of ammunition you can buy at the store. You can have a bonfire in your backyard, unless there's a drought. Then you just have to check with the local fire department and get a permit. But there aren't like these statewide regulations really cracking down on that type of stuff. I'd say it's pretty free compared to the rest of the country. And it's a big reason I moved back. This is the first time I moved for political reasons. I mean, Utah was okay, but they weren't as bad. They weren't as good as New Hampshire. Ronwell, hey Reed, just wanted to stop by. Good to see you, man. Thanks for checking in. Yeah, I had Mark Victor on the podcast last night. So he is the Libertarian candidate in Arizona. And I encourage everyone to go watch that podcast, because I pushed him on some stuff, and he's a nice guy, and I do think he's a solid Libertarian, but I don't know, like he fell kind of flat in some of the answers he gave me. I asked him about NATO, whether or not we should be in NATO, and for a Libertarian, that should be a pretty fucking easy question to answer. The answer is no. And he said, I'm not pro-NATO, I'm not anti-NATO, I'm pro-peace, and I would have to see, what made the most sense. And I asked him, well, okay, how about what you have seen already? What answer would you be more likely to give? I mean, do you think we should or shouldn't, based on how NATO has, led us to where we are with Russia right now, for example? And he said, well, you're asking me to prove a counterfactual, which is dumb. I wasn't asking him to prove a counterfactual. I was just asking him to say whether or not he thought NATO had actually done a lot of good. And then he didn't really give satisfactory answers on Israel. He was great on China. I got to give him that, because Blake Masters is fucking terrible on China. He gave pretty good answers surrounding China. But most of his foreign policy stuff is theoretical. It's like, I wish we had a private army that we could privately send wherever we want to privately protect peaceful people. It's like, okay, dude, but that you're talking La La Land right now. Like, this is real life. What do you want to do? Should we send anything to Ukraine? And he's like, no. But if people want to send weapons, or they want to go fight themselves, or they want to hire a private army, it's just like, dude, okay. But, if you're talking to just me, another Libertarian, about these theoretical ideas, that's one thing. But when you're running for Senate, and when you're talking publicly about this type of stuff, it's very different. So I told him I don't want him to drop out. I don't think he should. I think he should be extorting Blake Masters to be better. I think Blake Masters obviously understands libertarianism. He used to be one a long time ago. and we should be demanding more libertarian positions from him before just lining up behind him. So I told, and also Mark Victor has offered Blake Masters a conversation as long as it's public, and he's willing to hear him out and see if he should endorse him. So I don't know why Blake isn't taking him up on that if Blake is sympathetic to libertarianism in any way. I mean, if this were Rand Paul versus a libertarian, and the libertarian said, I want to talk to Rand Paul, I'm sure Rand Paul would be willing to listen to him and hear him out. I mean, that's kind of what happened with Shane Hazel. When Shane Hazel was running for Senate down in Georgia, Rand Paul actually went and talked to him and went on his podcast asking him to drop out and trying to give him reasons. And it wasn't even to endorse him. It was to endorse some awful Republican. But Rand Paul was willing to do that. I'm sure he'd be willing to talk to a libertarian who's running against him to drop out and endorse him. So I don't really understand why Blake Masters, who is being hurt by the presence of this libertarian who is going to take a lot of votes away from him, to me, it seems pretty obvious that they should be willing to talk. Thoughts on Bitcoin? I'm not currently a crypto guy, but I keep hearing it heavily pushed on libertarian channels like Clint's and by Shane Hazel the other day. Are you on the crypto train? I am finally officially on the crypto train. I don't have a lot of it, but I finally set up a wallet and can do transactions. I hadn't until a couple months ago. I'll be honest, I've been back and forth on Bitcoin. I think you can definitely make money off of it. I don't think it's going to be a world reserve currency or that it's going to supplant the dollar or anything like that. I think people are religious about Bitcoin. They either religiously hate it or they religiously love it, and it's the best thing in the world, or it's just a complete joke and a complete Ponzi scheme. I'm kind of in the middle. I think it's something that you can make money off of, but I think people are a little ridiculous about how big their expectations are for it. So to answer your question, yes, I am on the Bitcoin train now, but I'm not a heavy investor. And I'd say I'm a cautious skeptic, but also someone who thinks that there's definitely money to be made. But I'm not really the guy to ask about that. Definitely, I would talk to Clint. Let's see. Shouldn't the Libertarian Party try to run an anti-APAC Republican rather than let the media keep ignoring the party and getting nowhere? Yeah, I mean, I interviewed, what's his name? Bruce Fenton, who was, running as a Republican in New Hampshire for Senate. And I asked him about the Israeli lobby and giving money to Israel and, all that stuff. And he was great on it. He was good on Saudi Arabia, good on Taiwan. And he got 5% in the primary. So I don't know. I'm all for running Republicans who are great, and I'll always vote for them. If Bruce Fenton had been the Republican nominee, I would have voted for him over Jeremy Kaufman, even though I'm on Kaufman's campaign. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, I'm all for that, but they don't tend to get anywhere. They really are religious about it. That's what has turned me off, how much they think it's going to solve everything. I think your perspective is much more reasonable. Thanks for the reply. You got it, man. Try to be reasonable. So I did have Austin Peterson on the show yesterday, and he gave... So I get a lot of pushback for this type of stuff all the time. I'll have people on, and I'll ask them questions, and I won't talk much. I'll just let them talk, and people get upset at me for not enough input or not enough pushback, which... Sometimes I understand it. Sometimes I'm like, look, this is the whole point of having a show. You have people on and you let them talk and hear what they have to say. I don't like Tim Pool's style of talking over people. I don't like when people have guests on their show and don't let them talk at all. That's why I do these live streams, so people can ask me directly what I think. But he said a lot of stuff about the Russia-Ukraine war that I disagree with. He puts more of the blame on Russia. I would put more of the blame on the United States. He said that, that Russia has had the same leader for a longer time, and the United States has democratic elections where leaders change. So to say that this has been orchestrated by the United States government doesn't make as much sense when the Russian government has the same leader. I mean, Victoria Nuland was in the government back then, and Joe Biden was also in the government back then, back in 2014 with the coup. A lot of these people just rotate through the revolving door of government. They never actually leave, like Secretary Blinken, and then on the Republican side too, like Mike Pompeo, people they get a different position every time, and they're always pushing the same policies. So the idea that the United States government hasn't had a consistent agenda against Russia, I don't think is true. You could watch the documentary A Very Heavy Agenda, and you'll find that a lot of the same neocons who pushed to get us into war in Iraq, they were also pushing to get us into war in Ukraine, and they've been successful. Robert Kagan, Bill Kristol, a lot of the same people who pushed Project for a New American Century ended up pushing for this war in Ukraine, and they just rebranded themselves from neoconservatives to like liberal interventionalists is what they call themselves now. And some neocons left the party after Trump, like Bill Kristol and Robert Kagan, and then some stayed in, like Mike Pompeo, or John Bolton. John Bolton, I don't even know what he considers himself now. I don't know if he's still a Republican or not. He's certainly a Trump enemy. But then you got people like Mike Pompeo or Nikki Haley, who try to still sort of court that conservative vote. Mike Pompeo and Nikki Haley both endorsed Don Bolduc, by the way, and Nikki Haley actually came here and campaigned for him. But all that to say, I definitely disagreed with a lot of Austin's points. But what I find interesting is Austin, even though I think he's wrong about the motivations behind why this is happening, when the invasion kicked off, he was on Twitter. He was actually constantly saying, we can't get involved in this. Even though he really doesn't like Putin, even though he really doesn't like Russia, he was saying, we can't send money to Ukraine. We can't get involved in this war. And he even made jokes like, okay, fine, Ukraine can join NATO if the United States gets to leave. So he is actually better on all this stuff than Blake Masters is, which I find kind of funny. So anyone who's outraged about what Austin Peterson had to say, you should be more upset about Blake Masters, because Austin Peterson isn't running for anything. And he also, even though he has different opinions than me about the reasons behind this war and like what the motivations are, at least he doesn't want to get involved or send money over there. So I just thought that was interesting. I got a lot of comments on YouTube and then also on Telegram asking me why I didn't push back harder. I only had him for half an hour, and I did ask him nicely to come on, and I told him we were going to mostly talk about the midterms and then just a little bit about nukes. It ended up becoming mostly about the war in Russia. But you guys know what I think, and I don't know, like it is what it is. I did re-listen to it, and I wish I had pushed back a little harder on the last question I asked, but I don't know, is what it is. Let's see what we got here. John Bolton, Syria is the answer to your question if you want to know why Trump didn't pardon Assange. Well, also, Trump is the guy who went after Assange. He wanted to prosecute him under the Espionage Act. A lot of people forget that. I never understood why people thought Trump would pardon him. I know he said some good things about him in 2016, but that was all over the WikiLeaks thing. The election, the 2016 election being rigged by Hillary Clinton during the primary. That was why he liked Julian Assange. It was all selfish. I mean, I never really saw much of a reason for him to actually pardon him. So I was not surprised by that at all. How much effort do you put into self-sufficiency, gardening, and water capture and agorism? Or do you see a path using current markets? I don't garden and I don't capture water. I do have gold and silver and guns, and I do have a lot of skills that could be used. So, I'm still definitely tapped into the system. I pay taxes. I have an electric bill, stuff like that. But I also am pretty independent. I know how to live off the grid. And I have money that's outside the system. I also have a lot of cash hidden that's not in a bank, just in case. I have a lot in. I actually have all my money in a credit union because I consider those to be more reliable than banks if things go south. But in 2020, I got a lot of cash payments for stuff, and I never put it into the bank because I was worried about a run on the bank because there was actually a cash shortage for a while, and I didn't know what was going to end up going on with that. I didn't know if we were going to revert to a CDBC or if, you know, people were going to try to go get their cash. And I think banks typically hold like 10 to 20% of cash reserves of whatever credit they have at the bank. So I held on to a lot of it. I've spent a lot of that, so it's not even tracked by the government. They don't even necessarily know how much I've spent. But yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of a mix. I'm definitely tapped into the system, but I try to work outside of it a little bit too. Hi, I hope you're doing well. I live in the EU and we're doomed this winter. If I could get citizenship in a warm and multicultural place like Qatar or the United Arab Emirates, I would move there as soon as possible. Yeah, I hear you. I'm certainly not jealous of you guys over there. What denomination were you? I'm assuming this is asking about when I was a Christian. So we were non-denominational, which is a denomination in itself. But I mean, we were Baptists, basically. We were kind of chill Baptists. And I mean, yeah, we went to Sunshine Baptist Church for a while. So we were Baptists, and then we tried to say we were non-denominational, and then we did a little bit of Pentecostal stuff. But mostly like Baptist, Pentecostal, Protestant Christians. All right, guys. Well, I just wanted to do a little live stream there because I had some time, and I thought that Fetterman debate was absolutely hilarious. So if you have time, go check that out. Also, go check out my interview from last night with Mark Kelly. Let me know what you think. And yeah, also go check. Actually, you know, I'll just play this real quick before I go. We have a new Jeremy Kaufman ad out. So I'll just play this and then I'll end the stream. But it's probably the best ad the Libertarian Party's ever put out, I'm going to say. So here, I'm going to share the screen and we'll play it.
Six months ago, I put out a satirical ad saying that war is gay. I'm here to tell you the truth. War is retarded. It's retarded. We're not supposed to say that word, but this is exactly why we need to say it. Because if you support war, you are a retard. We have done this before. This isn't new. Weak, soft, anti-American terrorist sympathizer. These are some of the things you would have been called for opposing the Iraq War in 2003 or Vietnam in the 1960s. And today, you'll be called similar things for opposing America's involvement in the Ukraine and Russian conflict. Well, you're not. What you actually are is brave. Being anti-war is always unpopular, but it takes people who are willing to stand up and say, no, this isn't our fight. No, we don't need to be involved. And the people who are weak and soft are the people who want to steal from you to get us involved in a conflict we have no business in. The war on poverty was won by poverty. The war on drugs was won by drugs. The war on Afghanistan was won by goat herders with an average income of $500 per year. Don Bolduc and Maggie Hassan want us to fight China and Russia simultaneously.
What boggles my mind, Steve, is the fact that we haven't gone all in on this already. Diplomatically, informationally, militarily, and economically.
Everything's on the table when it comes to keeping our country safe. And what we've seen from Russia in particular recently.
And we can't take any pressure off China either. We got to go after China because they're in this with them.
Maggie Hassan and Don Bolduc want to take your money so that your children can die and America can be hurt. This November, be brave, be anti-war, be a libertarian. I'm Jeremy Kaufman, and I'm serious.